I don't know if we need to experience everything in order to move out of something that we've been attached to, a pattern. But I do know that that has been on my mind. And I was having a conversation earlier today about it was a pattern that I was discussing with a friend of mine. And let me just describe this to you because I think this is a super common experience and we've all done it in one way or another. And just describe that as I see the process and see if this resonates with you. So it seems like what we do is we experience, I always talk about it as a sort of pendulum, if you will. And so I've also refer to it as that pendulum being a paradigm. And so there, from one end, there's certain types of behaviors and things that are coming from this paradigm, and it'll all make sense in a minute. And then at the other end of it, it seems like there's completely opposite sorts of behaviors, but it still belongs to the same root, the same energetic root. And so let's talk about, say, for example, what's a good one? Okay. So one I talked about yesterday, that's a really good one. So this is to do with a model of, let's say, success. Okay, so let's say there's someone and they've got this model of success and they're driven. It's really common, actually, this. At one end of things, at this pendulum, they're very driven, very goal-focused, very, achievement, over exceed, driving themselves at all points to hit those markers and get that external validation, if you will. Okay, so that's one end of the success failure paradigm. And then at the other end of it, it may be that, maybe they don't even try. Maybe they say, what's the point? I'm going to fail anyway. And perhaps apathy is part of that, and a sense of sabotaging themselves. So they'll set themselves up for situations where it might be very apparent that they weren't going to succeed and that they believe they won't succeed. So there's a whole bunch of behaviors, escapist behaviors that go with that end of the paradigm. But what I commented on yesterday, and it relates to today's conversation as well, is that they're exactly the same thing. This swing of the pendulum from one to the other, they're both coming from, obviously, I'm sure you appreciate that, they're coming from not good enough. Anything, like from this sense of that type A person who's really success driven, etc., there's this proving that they're doing, this looking for external validation from work situations, from whoever, with which to feed back to them that they are good enough. So they very much externalize that need. And so at the other end of the paradigm, you've got, oh, what's the point? I can't succeed anyway. Self-sabotage, etc. Also coming from not good enough, as I'm sure you can appreciate. So in fact, although the behaviors can look incredibly different, the root of it is the same. And then ultimately, to bring a kind of awareness to it, there's the opportunity in those experiences for us to come into, let's say, I don't know if it's the right word, but the more balanced perspective, more harmonious, or closer to it, the truth, really, which is that they already are. They are neither that assertion of good enough, right? Because that comes from an attachment to a story they told themselves that was never true from when they were younger. And that's what they're reacting to. And in both cases, that's what they're reacting to. And so rather than, as I've said before, I am good enough, and the assertions of that through the type A and success-based model, or the sort of self-sabotaging and failure-based model, I am not good enough. The truth would be I am. They already are separate to that identity that they've created for themselves around not good enough and good enough. Okay, so that's the paradigm. That's the swing of the pendulum. And of course, there's so many different versions of that good enough, not good enough paradigm, different reflections of that, if you will, or expressions of it. So I've been thinking about that. And one of the things I was talking about that I've noticed, and this is what I wanted to share with you, is that it seems like, and in my own case, also that it seems important to have experienced at least, I don't know, there's no, how can you quantify it, but a certain amount of one side of that pendulum that I'm describing it as, and a certain amount of the other, both. And I feel that we swing from one to the other. And I have one friend who describes his pattern as being definitely drives himself for a period of time based on the success, the need for external validation. And then when that just becomes too much and he's not getting the feeling that he's seeking of being good enough through these external circumstances, and or he finds that he kind of defaults after a while almost to the not good enough, and then goes into escapist behaviors, that kind of what's the point, and a sort of apathy, and he goes back and forth between one and the other, or he used to, as he described it to me. So there's so many different expressions, but it seems like it's important, or it's been valuable for us as human beings to experience both sides of that pendulum. And I was thinking about the story of Kali, the Hindu goddess Kali, and I'm just always very drawn to her story. So it's something that has a message in it that I think is interesting. So Kali is the goddess that, well, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. You can look it up if you're interested. But there was a goddess, Durga, and she'd been trying to, in brief, get rid of these demons. And it's a much more complicated story than that. But essentially, she was trying to kill these demons. And every time she killed one, every time there was a drop of blood that spilled, another demon would spring up. So they were just multiplying rather than reducing in number. And then Kali was created or came forward in that moment. And what she did, and I think this is the real message of this video, Kali, she's known for being fierce. And to me, she's the very essence of truth and fearlessness. But what she did was she swallowed, she ate, she consumed those demons. And so consider that. I love that story because she saw these things external that represented evil and something with which we can all relate to, things about other people or even ourselves that we're repelled by. Let's call them demons, if you will. Now, we have our own personal demons, perhaps, or we may see those in others. And we know the feeling of where we may judge that in another or judge that in ourselves, where we may hide from those aspects within ourselves, or not want to encounter those within another person. But just consider swallowing those demons. What does that actually mean? And for me, what that means is that you don't see yourself as separate to, in a sense, anything. So you see something externally to you and it repels you, look to how it's making you feel. If there's a reaction within you, well, and rather than judge it, ask yourself, what part of that, what does that reveal for you? What about that within yourself does that touch? Because usually there's a part of that you're not owning within yourself. It may be that, for example, somebody's really, let's say, has selfish behavior, and you think you're judging that, and you are separating yourself from that. What part of that do you not own within yourself? And it may not be selfish behavior. Look to the root of things. What part of need, because that's what's at the basis of really selfish behavior, what part of need do you not own? So the message of Kali is to harmonize, if you will. Take it all within you. It's all equal. All has equal value and no value. And so consider swallowing your demons, accepting all, and creating the space where you can experience all that you are. So I leave you with these thoughts today.